The yellow school bus lurched to a sudden stop as two police cruisers blocked its path, their red and blue lights painting the quiet suburban street in harsh, alternating colors. Inside the bus, 8-year-old Marcus Washington pressed his face against the window, his dark eyes wide with confusion as uniformed officers approached the door. His small hands clutched a worn teddy bear, the same one he carried every morning on his ride to Riverside Elementary's special needs program. "Open the door," Officer Martinez called out, his voice carrying the weight of authority even as uncertainty flickered across his weathered face. Behind him, his partner, Officer Chen, shifted uncomfortably, both men clearly questioning the nature of this unusual morning call. Bus driver Janet Rodriguez, a 23-year veteran of the district, slowly pulled the handle. The hydraulic hiss of the opening door seemed to echo through the morning air like a sigh of resignation. "Officers, what's the problem? We're just heading to school." "Ma'am, we received a call about a safety concern regarding one of your passengers," Officer Martinez explained, his tone measured but firm. "We need to speak with the child in question." From the sidewalk, Karen Westbrook stood with her arms crossed, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning sunlight. Her designer athleisure outfit and diamond tennis bracelet spoke of privilege and entitlement, while her cold blue eyes held a satisfaction that made Janet's stomach turn. Karen had been waiting for this moment, her iPhone already recording as she positioned herself for the perfect angle. "That's him," Karen declared, pointing directly at Marcus. "The one with the bear. He's been disrupting the entire bus route for weeks. My daughter Emma shouldn't have to endure this chaos every morning." Marcus began to whimper, the sound cutting through the morning stillness like a blade. His condition, a form of autism that made him sensitive to loud noises and sudden changes, was clearly triggered by the commotion. The other children on the bus, a mix of neurotypical students and those with various disabilities, watched in stunned silence as the drama unfolded. "Please, he's just a little boy," Janet pleaded, stepping protectively in front of Marcus's seat. "He has every right to ride this bus. He's assigned to our special needs route." But Karen was already in motion, her voice rising with practiced indignation. "Rights? What about my daughter's rights? What about the rights of all the normal children who have to deal with his outbursts? He's dangerous. Officers. Last week he threw his lunchbox when the bus hit a pothole. My Emma could have been seriously injured." The morning had started like any other for Marcus. His mother, Dr. Alicia Washington, had helped him with his morning routine, ensuring his favorite blue backpack was packed with his sensory tools and comfort items. As a pediatric nurse at the county hospital, she understood the importance of structure and routine for children like Marcus. She trusted the school district's transportation system, never imagining that her son's daily journey would become a battleground for ignorance and discrimination. Marcus attended Riverside Elementary 3 days a week for intensive therapy and socialization programs. The other 2 days, he received home-based instruction. This carefully crafted schedule had been developed by a team of educators, therapists, and medical professionals to provide the best possible outcomes for his development. Janet Rodriguez had driven the special needs route for over a decade, and she knew each child's unique needs intimately. "He's never been violent," Janet insisted, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Marcus has been riding my bus for 2 years. He's one of the sweetest children I've ever transported. Yes, he gets overwhelmed sometimes, but that's perfectly normal for a child with his condition." Officer Chen knelt down to Marcus's level, his approach gentle despite the circumstances. "Hey there, buddy. What's your name?" Marcus looked up through tears, his voice barely a whisper. "Marcus, I want my mommy. The simple plea sent a ripple of discomfort through the growing crowd of onlookers. Neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, drawn by the unusual sight of police cars surrounding a school bus. Cell phone cameras appeared like flowers after rain, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. Karen sensed the shift in public opinion and doubled down on her accusations. Don't let him fool you with that innocent act. Last month, he had a complete meltdown when another child accidentally bumped into him. He was screaming and flailing around. My daughter came home traumatized. A meltdown is not violence. A new voice interjected. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a child psychologist who lived on the street, had been watching from her kitchen window. She approached the group with purposeful strides, her professional credentials giving weight to her words. What you're describing is a typical response to sensory overload. This child isn't dangerous. He's vulnerable. Karen's face flushed with anger. And who are you to interfere? This is about the safety of all our children, not about enabling problematic behavior. I'm a licensed child psychologist with 20 years of experience. Dr. Mitchell replied coolly. And what I see here is a clear case of discrimination against a disabled child. The word discrimination hung in the air like a thunderclap. Officer Martinez looked increasingly uncomfortable as he realized the legal implications of the situation. The Americans with Disabilities Act was clear about equal access to education and transportation for disabled students. Meanwhile, other parents began to gather, their voices adding to the growing chorus of concern. Maria Santos, whose own daughter Sophia rode the bus with Marcus, stepped forward with fierce determination. My Sophia loves Marcus, Maria declared, her accent thick with emotion. He shares his crackers with her every day. He's kind and gentle. This woman is lying about him being dangerous. Karen's composure began to crack under the mounting pressure. You people don't understand. I've been documenting every incident. I have videos, timestamps, detailed reports. The school district has ignored my complaints for months. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be an extensive collection of recordings. Look at this. Here's him having an episode last Tuesday. And here's another one from last week. This is unacceptable behavior that puts other children at risk. Janet Rodriguez watched the videos with growing horror, not at Marcus's behavior, but at the realization that Karen had been systematically stalking and recording a disabled child. You've been filming him every day. I've been documenting evidence, Karen corrected, her voice defensive. Someone has to protect the normal children from these disruptions. The crowd's mood shifted dramatically. Parents who had been quietly observing now spoke up with increasing anger. The idea that someone had been secretly recording their children, particularly a vulnerable child with disabilities, struck at the heart of every parent's protective instincts. This is sick, called out James Thompson, a father of 3. You've been stalking a little boy with autism. Karen's carefully constructed narrative began to unravel. I'm not stalking anyone. I'm exercising my right to document threats to my child's safety. That boy is unpredictable and potentially violent. Doctor, Mitchell stepped closer, her professional demeanor masking barely contained fury. Show me one instance of actual violence in those videos. Show me one moment where this child harmed anyone. Karen scrolled through her phone frantically, her earlier confidence evaporating. The videos showed Marcus stimming, crying, and yes, occasionally having what could be termed meltdowns, but nothing that constituted violence or posed a genuine threat to other children. Officer Chen, who had been quietly observing the exchange, finally spoke up. Ma'am, I need to ask you directly. Has this child ever physically harmed your daughter or any other child? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Karen's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. He threw his lunchbox. It could have hit someone. But did it hit anyone? Officer Chen pressed. That's not the point, Karen snapped. The potential for violence exists. Why should we wait until someone gets hurt? The circular logic of her argument was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone present. Janet Rodriguez, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally found her voice again. In 15 years of driving special needs routes, I've never seen a child more gentle than Marcus. He apologizes if he thinks he's been too loud. He shares his snacks with other children. He helps slower children find their seats. This woman is targeting him because he's different. As the confrontation intensified, more neighbors joined the growing crowd. The morning school routine had been completely disrupted, but rather than anger at the inconvenience, there was a palpable sense of outrage at the injustice unfolding before them. Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who had been watching from her garden, approached the bus with a small bag of homemade cookies. "This is for Marcus," she said to Janet. "He always waves to me from his window. Such a sweet boy." The simple gesture of kindness seemed to break something inside Karen. Her face contorted with rage as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. "You're all being manipulated by this performance," she declared, her voice rising to near hysteria. "That child is a ticking time bomb. I've seen him get violent with his own aide. I've documented everything." But as she spoke, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her husband's name, and she answered with visible frustration. "Not now. Richard. I'm dealing with the situation." The conversation was brief, but audible to those nearby. Richard Westbrook's voice carried clearly through the phone's speaker. "Karen, what the hell are you doing? I'm getting calls from partners at the firm. There's a video of you harassing a disabled child going viral on social media. You need to stop this immediately." Karen's face paled as she realized the implications. In the age of social media, her actions were being broadcast to the world in real time. Multiple parents had been live-streaming the confrontation, and the videos were already spreading across platforms with hashtags like Just Justice for Marcus and Just Disabled Rights Now. Officer Martinez received a call on his radio. The voice of his supervisor was calm, but firm. "Martinez, I need you to de-escalate that situation immediately. We're getting calls from the superintendent's office and the mayor's office. This is turning into a public relations nightmare." But before Martinez could respond, another vehicle pulled up to the scene. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows parked behind the police cruisers, and from it emerged Dr. Robert Harrison, the district superintendent himself. Dr. Harrison was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions. His presence immediately changed the dynamics of the situation. Parents stepped back respectfully, while Karen seemed to shrink into herself, suddenly aware that this had escalated far beyond her original intentions. "Officers, I need to speak with you privately." "Doctor," Harrison said, his tone brooking no argument. The three men moved away from the crowd, engaged in a heated but hushed conversation that lasted several minutes. When they returned, Officer Martinez's demeanor had completely changed. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Karen directly, "we need to discuss some serious concerns about your actions here today." Karen's earlier bravado crumbled completely. "I was just trying to protect my daughter. Is that a crime now?" "No, but filming minor children without consent and making false reports to emergency services certainly are," Officer Martinez replied. The superintendent has informed us that this child has never been the subject of any disciplinary action. He has an exemplary record and is beloved by his teachers and therapists. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority. Mrs. Westbrook, I want to address your concerns directly. Marcus Washington is a valued member of our school community. He has never posed a threat to any other student. His transportation needs are protected under federal law, and any attempt to deny him access to school transportation based on his disability constitutes discrimination. The crowd had grown to include nearly 30 people, many of whom were now openly recording the superintendent's words. Dr. Harrison seemed to welcome the attention, understanding that this was a teachable moment for the entire community. Furthermore, he continued, I want to make it clear that recording minor children without parental consent, particularly children with disabilities, is not only ethically reprehensible, but potentially illegal. We will be reviewing all district policies regarding parent conduct and implementing additional protections for our vulnerable students. Karen's face had gone completely white. The realization that her actions might have legal consequences was clearly sinking in. I was just documenting behavior patterns. I never meant to. What you meant is irrelevant. Dr. Harrison interrupted. What matters is the impact of your actions on a vulnerable child and his family. Marcus's mother is a respected healthcare professional in this community. She trusted us to provide safe transportation for her son, and instead, he's been subjected to harassment and discrimination. As if summoned by his words, Dr. Alicia Washington's car pulled up to the scene. She had received frantic calls from neighbors and had left her shift at the hospital immediately. Her scrubs were still visible under her hastily thrown-on jacket as she rushed toward the bus. Where is my son? She demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life and death situations. What has happened to Marcus? The sight of Marcus's mother seemed to crystallize the full weight of the situation for everyone present. Here was a woman who saved lives every day, whose child was being targeted simply for being different. The injustice of it was overwhelming. Janet Rodriguez opened the bus door, and Dr. Washington climbed aboard to find Marcus huddled in his seat, tears streaming down his face, but no longer crying audibly. The resilience that children with autism often develop in the face of an overwhelming world was heartbreaking to witness. Mommy, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. Did I do something wrong? The question shattered the last vestiges of Karen's justification. Even she seemed to realize that her actions had traumatized an innocent child, whose only crime was being born different. Dr. Washington's response was gentle, but firm. No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Some people don't understand how special you are. But that's their problem, not yours. She turned to face the crowd, her nurse's training allowing her to maintain composure even in the face of such emotional turmoil. My son has autism. He processes the world differently than other children. He's not dangerous. He's not violent. He's a little boy who loves dinosaurs and chocolate milk and giving hugs to people he trusts. Her words carried across the crowd like a stone dropped in still water, creating ripples of understanding and empathy. Parents began to see Marcus not as a threat or a problem to be solved, but as a child, deserving of protection and acceptance. Dr. Harrison seized the moment to address the broader implications. This incident represents a failure of our community to live up to its values of inclusion and acceptance. We have policies in place to protect all our students. But policies mean nothing without the support of parents and community members who understand that diversity makes us stronger. Karen, realizing that public opinion had turned completely against her, made one final desperate attempt to justify her actions. "I was just trying to protect my daughter. Surely you can understand a mother's concern for her child's safety." Dr. Washington's response was measured but pointed. "I understand a mother's protective instincts perfectly. That's why I'm confused about why you chose to target my son, instead of educating your daughter about differences and acceptance. My protective instincts are telling me that the threat to my child's safety isn't coming from other children on the bus." The implication was clear and devastating. Karen had positioned herself as the protector of children, while simultaneously becoming the primary threat to a child's well-being and safety. Officer Chen, who had been quietly observing the exchange, finally spoke up. "Mrs. Westbrook, I need to inform you that making false reports to emergency services is a misdemeanor offense. Additionally, your filming of minor children without consent may constitute harassment under state law." The legal implications seemed to snap Karen out of her defensive posture. I think I should call my lawyer," she stammered. "That might be wise," Dr. Harrison replied, "because the school district will be conducting a thorough investigation into this incident. We take discrimination against disabled students very seriously." As the immediate crisis began to de-escalate, the focus shifted to Marcus and his well-being. Dr. Washington had boarded the bus and was using techniques she'd learned from Marcus's therapy team to help him regulate his emotions and feel safe again. The other children on the bus, who had been silent witnesses to the entire ordeal, began to speak up. Sophia Santos, Maria's daughter, raised her small hand. "Mrs. Rodriguez, is Marcus okay? He looks sad." Janet Rodriguez smiled through her own tears. "He's going to be fine, sweetheart. We're all going to take extra good care of him." Emma Westbrook, Karen's daughter, had been watching the proceedings with growing confusion and embarrassment. At 12 years old, she was beginning to understand the full implications of her mother's actions. "Mom, why are you being mean to Marcus?" she asked, her voice small but clear enough for the crowd to hear. "He's always nice to me. He gave me his fruit snacks when I forgot my lunch last week." The innocence of the child's question exposed the fundamental flaw in Karen's narrative. Her own daughter contradicted the claims of danger and disruption, revealing instead a pattern of kindness and generosity from Marcus. Karen's face crumpled as she realized that her actions had not only failed to protect her daughter, but had actually exposed Emma to the shame and embarrassment of having a parent who had publicly discriminated against a disabled child. Dr. Harrison addressed the crowd once more, his voice carrying the weight of institutional change. "I want to make an announcement that will go out to all district families today, effective immediately. We are implementing new policies to protect our students with disabilities from harassment and discrimination. We will also be expanding our community education programs to promote understanding and acceptance of neurological differences." The crowd responded with spontaneous applause. But Dr. Harrison wasn't finished. "Additionally, I want to personally apologize to Marcus and his family for the trauma they've endured today. The district failed to adequately protect one of our most vulnerable students, and that failure ends now." The public apology was unprecedented in its scope and sincerity. Parents began to realize they were witnessing not just the resolution of a single incident, but a fundamental shift in how the community would approach disability and inclusion. As the police officers prepared to leave, Officer Martinez approached Dr. Washington with evident discomfort. "Ma'am, I want to apologize for our role in this situation. We should have investigated the complaint more thoroughly before taking action. Dr. Washington's response was gracious, but firm. I appreciate your apology. Officer Martinez, I hope this incident will serve as a learning experience for everyone involved. My son deserves to feel safe in his community, just like any other child. The news crews had begun to arrive, drawn by the viral videos and the involvement of the superintendent, Dr. Harrison, recognizing the opportunity to send a broader message, agreed to speak with reporters. This incident represents both a failure and an opportunity. He told the gathering media, "We failed to protect a vulnerable student from harassment, but we now have the opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to inclusion and acceptance. The actions of one individual do not represent the values of our community." As the media attention intensified, Karen found herself increasingly isolated. The parents who had initially been neutral observers were now actively avoiding her, and some were openly expressing their disgust at her actions. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who had brought cookies for Marcus, approached Karen with a directness that belied her gentle appearance. "Young lady, I came to this country 50 years ago with nothing but hope for a better life for my children. I've seen real discrimination and real hardship. What you've done to that little boy is shameful." The rebuke from an elder in the community carried particular weight, and Karen seemed to shrink under the moral authority of Mrs. Chen's words. Meanwhile, Marcus was beginning to recover from his ordeal. The combination of his mother's presence, the supportive words from his friends on the bus, and the removal of the immediate threat had helped him regulate his emotions. He was even able to smile when Mrs. Chen handed him a cookie through the bus window. "Thank you," he said softly, his natural politeness shining through despite the morning's trauma. Dr. Harrison announced that the school day would continue as normal, with additional counseling support available for any students who needed it. The bus would proceed to school, and Marcus would receive his regular therapy sessions with extra attention to processing the morning's events. As the crowd began to disperse, Karen found herself alone, except for her daughter Emma. The isolation was complete and devastating. She had begun the morning believing she was protecting her child and her community, only to discover that she had become the very threat she claimed to oppose. Emma looked up at her mother with eyes that held disappointment beyond her years. "Mom, I think you owe Marcus an apology." The simple wisdom of her daughter's words seemed to break through Karen's defensive barriers. She approached the bus hesitantly. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. "I made a mistake." Dr. Washington, still protective of her son, listened, but didn't immediately respond. Marcus, however, looked up from his cookie with the guileless acceptance that often characterizes children with autism. "That's okay," he said simply. "Everybody makes mistakes sometimes." The grace of his forgiveness was almost unbearable to witness. Here was a child who had been terrorized and traumatized, offering forgiveness to the person who had caused his pain. It was a reminder of the fundamental decency that Karen's actions had threatened to overshadow. But forgiveness, while healing, doesn't erase consequences. Dr. Harrison approached Karen with a formal letter that had been prepared during the crisis. "Mrs. Westbrook, you are hereby banned from all school district property and events pending a full investigation into your conduct. Your daughter's enrollment is not affected, but your access to school facilities is suspended indefinitely." The formal punishment was swift and decisive. Karen's attempt to exert control over the school environment had backfired completely, resulting in her own exclusion from the community she had claimed to protect. As the bus finally began to move toward school, nearly an hour behind schedule, the children inside seemed to settle into a new understanding of their community's values. They had witnessed injustice, but they had also seen it confronted and defeated by adults who chose to stand up for what was right. Janet Rodriguez caught Marcus's eye in her rearview mirror. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Marcus considered the question with the seriousness that he brought to all inquiries. "I'm okay now. Are we still going to school?" "We're going to school," Janet confirmed. "And you know what, I think it's going to be a very good day." The prediction proved accurate. When the bus arrived at Riverside Elementary, the entire staff was waiting to greet the children. Principal Martinez had briefed the teachers on the morning's events, and they had prepared a special welcome for Marcus that emphasized his value to the school community. Marcus's favorite teacher, Mrs. Kelly, greeted him with a warm hug and a promise of extra time in the sensory room if he needed it. The therapy dog, a golden retriever named Buddy, was brought out specifically to help Marcus transition from the morning's trauma to the safety of the school environment. The news coverage of the incident continued throughout the day, but the focus shifted from the initial confrontation to the community's response. Social media was flooded with messages of support for Marcus and his family, along with donations to autism awareness organizations and special needs programs. The hashtag #JachiMarcusStrong began trending nationally, with parents sharing their own stories of children with disabilities who had faced discrimination and the communities that had supported them. The incident had become a catalyst for broader conversations about inclusion and acceptance. By evening, the story had reached national news programs. Dr. Harrison found himself fielding calls from education officials across the country who wanted to learn about the district's response to the crisis. The swift and decisive action had become a model for how institutions should handle discrimination against disabled students. For Karen Westbrook, the consequences continued to mount. Her husband's law firm, concerned about the negative publicity, had placed her on administrative leave from her volunteer position with their foundation. The video of her confrontation with Marcus had been viewed millions of times, and her social media accounts were flooded with criticism. But perhaps the most significant consequence was the loss of her standing in the community she had claimed to protect. The parents who had once included her in their social circles now avoided her, and her daughter Emma was facing questions from classmates about her mother's actions. Dr. Washington, meanwhile, had been contacted by numerous disability rights organizations offering support and resources. The incident had highlighted the ongoing challenges faced by families of children with disabilities, but it had also demonstrated the power of community solidarity in confronting discrimination. A week after the incident, the school board held a special meeting to address the community's response and to formalize new policies protecting students with disabilities. The meeting drew a capacity crowd, with many parents wanting to express their support for inclusive education. Dr. Harrison presented a comprehensive plan for enhancing disability awareness and inclusion throughout the district. The plan included mandatory training for all staff, expanded resources for families, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination against students with disabilities. Marcus and his mother attended the meeting, receiving a standing ovation from the assembled community. When given the opportunity to speak, Dr. Washington's words were both gracious and powerful. "My son's experience, while traumatic, has revealed the true character of our community. For every person who chose to discriminate against him, there were dozens who chose to stand up for him. That gives me hope for his future and for the future of all children who are different. The meeting concluded with the unanimous passage of the new inclusion policies, formally enshrining the community's commitment to protecting and supporting all students, regardless of their abilities or differences. As the months passed, the incident became a turning point for the community. The school district's inclusion programs became a model for other districts, and Marcus himself became something of a local celebrity, though he remained blissfully unaware of his fame. Karen Westbrook eventually moved away from the community, unable to rebuild her reputation after the incident. Her daughter Emma, however, remained in the district under her father's custody, and she became one of Marcus's most devoted friends and advocates. The yellow school bus continued its daily route, but with a new sense of purpose and protection. Janet Rodriguez had been honored by the district for her advocacy and had become a trainer for other drivers on supporting students with disabilities. Marcus continued to thrive in his school programs, his gentle nature and kind heart winning over everyone who met him. He never fully understood why that morning had been so frightening, but he did understand that he was loved and protected by his community. The teddy bear that had been his comfort during the crisis became a symbol of resilience and hope, reminding everyone who saw it that behind every disability is a child deserving of love, acceptance, and the chance to reach their full potential. The story of Marcus Washington and the morning that changed everything became a lesson in the power of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. It demonstrated that communities are defined not by their worst members, but by how they respond to injustice and how they choose to protect their most vulnerable members. In the end, Karen's attempt to exclude and discriminate had accomplished the opposite of her intentions. Instead of dividing the community, it had brought people together in defense of inclusion and acceptance. Instead of silencing Marcus, it had given him a voice and a platform. Instead of protecting her daughter from differences, it had taught Emma the value of standing up for others. The yellow school bus continued its daily journey, carrying not just children to school, but hope for a more inclusive and compassionate world. And, in the front seat, behind the same window where he had always sat, Marcus Washington continued to wave to Mrs. Chen in her garden, his smile a reminder that kindness and acceptance will always triumph over fear and discrimination. The community had learned that protecting one child means protecting all children, and that the strength of a society is measured not by its ability to exclude those who are different, but by its commitment to include and celebrate the unique gifts that every person brings to the world.